I would like to thank the LAF and Penn for having me here and the extraordinary organization that undermines. I'd like to speak about three things today. One is about this question of redefining nature in our age, because I think that's really the topic, the hidden agenda. The second is this notion of resilient design, what I would rather call new topical landscapes. How do we reshape our land in view of the consequences of climate change and social change that are happening? And then what I would like to call commonalities and divides, which is towards a culture of difference in this age of globalization. I think we shouldn't confuse globalization with similarity. I think in a global situation like today, each place has its unique characteristics, and this is sort of a plea towards cultivating this local uniqueness, so to speak. So basically, this idea of nature as a fabrication is not new. As you know, the Romans believed in three kinds of nature: untouched wilderness, productive agriculture, and the garden as cultural and symbolic artifacts. And just to make my point clear, I'm choosing pictures here of Sebastião Salgado, the Brazilian reporter, photographer, on coffee plantations in Latin America. Actually, the place is called Latin America. There's a very direct consequence on the environment based on a whole heritage of tradition, and that of cultivating nature for the purpose of production is one of them. Today, only one kind of nature remains, where humankind dominates, seeking to show how both mastery over and understanding of the processes of natural creation occur. This scientific approach to nature is monitored, programmed, fabricated, and maintained through empirical methods of trial and error with the help of advanced cybernetics and modeling. We heard comments about that earlier on. The late ethnologist Claude Lévi-Strauss pronounced a speech in 2005, shortly before his death, he was 100 years old, on the growing difficulty of living together, where he reckoned that between the time when he was born in the early 20th century and now, the world had gone from 1.5 billion inhabitants to more than 6 billion. The population had more than quadrupled in his lifetime, and was still increasing logarithmically with each decade. In an ethical stand, he postulated that the disappearance of species was a fundamental breach in the integrity of the creation, and hence the rights of humanity should cease as soon as they encroach on the survival of other species. One could say cynically that's wishful thinking, but I find it revealing looking at Salgado's work on the African savanna elephants that it's quite revealing. We realize the fragility of the whole system based on that. Now that we humans number more than 7 billion, unbounded human growth will cause immeasurable repercussions both in the cultural and biological diversity of the planet, ultimately jeopardizing mankind itself. These are pictures still from Salgado reporting on the Tutsi refugee camps after the genocide in Rwanda. All a consequence, of course, of human density, inter-ethnic rivalry, but also lack of resources. And just see how the African savanna gets occupied by our people, right? We have entered an age of complete natural fabrication, where landscape architects are asked to reinvent forms of nature that respond appropriately to the unwieldy challenges of climate change, food shortages, etc. Such fabrications will require a proactive understanding of ecology and diversity, and will certainly produce landscapes that will challenge conventional wisdom. And what I find remarkable with this work of Salgado, if you know about his work, there was a great film by Wim Wenders on him, is that finally, after having seen everything that he'd seen in the world, wildlife, overpopulation, conflict, etc., he decided to revegetate his own farm in Brazil, in the Instituto Terra, where he planted over 2 million trees and revegetated totally eroded landscape in a sign of hope. So in a way, it challenges conventional wisdom, and it completely redefines our understanding of nature embedded in our collective consciousness. And of course, you may all say, well, Leila and Sebastião Segaldo are not landscape architects. What are they doing? What is their business doing that? I think that we have to be much more open to receiving ideas and initiatives from a variety of fields and people. That would be a key to the success of our profession. Resilient design, inventing new topical landscapes. Natural fabrication will undoubtedly require sustained multidisciplinary exchanges and enough creative power to invent new forms of landscape that can match the formidable societal and environmental challenges ahead. John Hennessy, the president of Stanford University, created a cross-disciplinary joint program at the beginning of the 20th century that merged schools ranging from engineering to the arts and helped break down conventional barriers between discipline, thus allowing creative interaction within established structures that questioned old habits. And I believe we're all here today to question old habits too. So I'm going to show you an example here of the work that we've been doing in Jordan, on the Jordan River, in an area that actually corresponds to the border with Israel and has not moved since the 1948 War of Independence. And this land, very fertile land, very mythical land, was used to produce energy, actually. You'll see in the further pictures. And what's interesting with these pictures is today, along the Rift Valley, as you know, one of the longest faults, geological faults in the world, roughly over 5,000 miles long. Within this area, on the Galilee side of the Jordan River, we have 60,000 people living there, and on the Jordan side, we have a little less than 1 million on the same valley. And the imbalance is obvious here. And I believe that by training generations of engineers, designers, and artists to work together in synergy, to work differently when faced with unforeseen challenges in the environment, we too could become more creatively responsive. Here it's not a question of too much water, it's a question of too little. Syria is 10 kilometers away. There's almost no more water in the Jordan River, which you see in the background here. And I believe that the most critical question in that environment, and it is probably one of the main reasons for the conflict in that area, apart from religion, is the lack of that resource, or let's say differently, the mismanagement of that resource. Resilient landscape design requires a significant change in attitude through the invention of new terrain topologies that will perform better in an environment with shifting boundary conditions. We mapped this area. Here you see a power plant from the air designed by the architect Mendelssohn in the 20s. It provided most of the electricity to both Jordan and Palestine at the time in the 1930s. You see the canal that was drawn through, drawing the water from the Yarmouk River and from the Jordan River. And what we see very revealing through this mapping, we use drones and terrestrial laser scanners, is we get finally the impression, the relief on the imprint of human activity on this land. New topical landscapes will emerge that better express the specific needs and priorities of a world exceeding 7 billion inhabitants. In this area, we definitely have a problem of overpopulation too. Designers may observe, understand, and acquire knowledge about a particular situation, but they will also need to react and think creatively in synergy with others to find solutions. So this is the view of this point cloud model that we generated of this area that's definitely probably twice the size of Central Park. You even see Washingtonia palms that were brought in by Mendelssohn to decorate the power plant at the time. A topical selection of projects will suppose a fundamentally new mode of interaction between disciplines where landscapes will be prototyped, simulated, and tested in a series of feedback loops. I'm not only showing you pictures, I'm showing you a working tool in which we could probably retain water, generate new landscapes, recreate tourism here, create employment for the Jordanian population that's totally underemployed, etc., etc. We need that level of accuracy in order to succeed. This process of dialogue and interdisciplinary design, I'm not sure this is going to work. We'll try. No, it didn't work. I don't know how to play the video here. Oh, there we go. Here you see a sectional flight through the Jordan River, which is impossible right now. It's strewn with mines and wild pigs that sometimes fly in the air when they tread on the wrong mine. This process of dialogue and interdisciplinary design iteration will undoubtedly give birth to new forms of natural systems and will have deep repercussions on the secular values that we presently attribute to nature. Landscape education should therefore encourage creative invention through reinforced dialogues with other disciplines, developing design tools and methods that are better adapted to our rapidly changing world. Topical landscapes produced through this exchange will challenge many preconceptions and bring renewed confidence and in a creative ability for our field by fostering innovation through experimentation and design. So basically what's amazing about this film is that we never went there actually, but produced it through this technology. And it's actually a very, very precise terrain model. Commonalities and divides towards a culture of difference. Recognizing and fostering regional and cultural differences in the landscape will probably be the strongest challenge of this global age. As with the disappearance of species, countless cultural traditions related to landscape will disappear in coming decades due to the increased political and economic and environmental pressures of globalizations. I'm showing here an extreme case, the Yanomami Indians of northern Brazil, also documented by Salgado, where this direct, immediate relationship to nature is something for us that is completely beyond understanding, but is actually there. And these populations are clearly disappearing very rapidly. Why am I saying that? Augustin Berg, a French geographer, reminds us of the very particular relationship that humans have with their natural environment, and this varies from culture to culture. A relationship that differs strongly and symbolically from one society to another, from one language to the next. We went to Kyoto and started a documentation on these little gardens in Japan, and it really shows something very specific. Berg defines, in a way, this bond with nature as the ecumene, and reminds us of the unfathomable difference between cultures of the Orient and the Occident, the North and the South. The ecumene expresses, therefore, a society's attachment to a particular language of nature, to a particular landscape reality, an ontological predisposition towards nature where the relationship to landscape is understood as a set of strong beliefs and signifiers. And I think that is the only way to really reacquire or reconstruct respect for nature. Our relationship to the world is the complex product of language, work, culture, and myth, and the idealized expression of this faith in nature often merges at the cusp of strong cultural divides, where things can barely be explained, let alone be sensed. Commonalities and environmental concerns will thus continue to face prevailing linguistic and cultural divides, nurturing strong distinctions and discrepancies between human societies. As culture disappears, other hybrids will arise, underlining the prevalence of local law over globalization. And each landscape will thus become an invitation to express a culture of difference in an act of superb creative defiance. I thank you for your attention.